hear this tremendous noise. And you hear some people screaming. And someone said the other building came down.
We could see the plume coming. And as soon as it engulfed City Hall, we lost the light. And what happens is it just goes quiet. You know, sound can't travel in there.
504, watch it stay still. Nobody has any visibility.
You open your mouth, you take all that stuff in.
Everything south of the Brooklyn Bridge is in a dust cloud. There's no visibility. People all over the streets. Travel is near impossible.
The greatest piece of information that we didn't know and couldn't know and wish we had known was how fast it would collapse. From initial impact to falling down was 102 minutes. That's an hour and 42 minutes.
In those 102 minutes, thousands of people have been killed in New York and Washington.
They're going to set up either the first precinct or the trifecta.
We started walking, trying to find a place to settle and start to get control.
I made a point of being visible and kept my suit with all the dust on it and let them know that I was there, but I got out. And that a lot of other people got out. And that, you know, we shouldn't be afraid.
Okay.
It was like the Pied Piper, you know, with all the people following him. It was like a swarm. It was wild to think, you know, we were people running New York City.
Everyone in the city should remain calm. The very best thing to do right now would be to remain home. We've communicated with the White House. They are doing the best they can to secure the airspace around the city. The best way we're going to get through this is if we remain calm and just listen to everyone, not to panic.
And it was 9:31 when Bush started.
Aboard Air Force One, there's news of a sudden threat.
We were discussing what we needed to do with the president, whether we could get him back to Washington, D.C. or not. And at that point, the flight engineer yells up, you know, Colonel Tillman, get up here.
Air Force One is warned of a mysterious plane approaching their airspace.
Air Force One, it's your 12 o'clock and 70 miles now. There's an MD-80 Continental jet. Nobody's talking to him.
We've got an aircraft behind us that's descending into us, and he's not talking with anybody.
The mystery plane is quickly identified as a local airliner with a communications fault. But immediately, there's a more alarming threat.
It was passed to us that Angel was next, and our call sign was Angel. They didn't know how it was going to happen, but Angel was next.
The threat is soon identified as a crank call to the White House, just one of scores of false alarms on 9/11. Fighters are urgently scrambled from a Texas air base to escort Air Force One.
Just really hit home that Air Force One needed a fighter escort, you know, because we just didn't know what was going to happen next.
I literally jogged back to the site, and I could look over the debris field. A block away, I could see one fireman digging with his hands. And I looked down, and it's lights, and I realized I'm standing on top of a fire truck. The truck was buried, and fires everywhere. Now I want to start search and rescue. I only have 7, 8 firemen out of, 400 or 500 maybe. Most of them were gone.
An hour into the flight, we should have been in Washington by then. It was very clear that Air Force One wasn't quite sure where it was going.
You can't keep a president totally isolated, which would be our desire if we could. Our decisions are really focused on his safety, and oftentimes that's not consistent with keeping them happy. 9/11 was one of those days.
The discussion about going back to Washington started when we first got on Air Force One, and it never stopped until we got back to Washington. And sometimes it got pretty heated between the president and myself. Goes with the job of being a president chief of staff.
The president's press secretary came back at one point and he said, "The president is being evacuated. That's off the record." And I said, "No, that's historic."
By late morning, the order to clear the skies of 5,000 civilian aircraft is almost complete.
It was just incredible. The only aircraft on our scope, we knew exactly who they were, and if we didn't know who they were, we would take the fighters and go and investigate, ID them, and have them land.
It was a great call. It helped us out immensely. I think, making the call took some courage too.
Headquarters in Washington demanded to know who gave Ben Siney the authority to land all aircraft. And then 20 minutes later called back to know why I hadn't done it sooner.
It's now been more than 90 minutes since America heard from its president.
The president wanted to speak to the nation, and we did not have a video capability from the aircraft at the time.
We were trying to figure out where to go. And so a lot of the discussion on Air Force One was about what options do we have. And it was just fortuitous that at Barksdale's Air Force Base in Louisiana, there was an exercise scheduled that day that had them on the highest level of alert because they were doing a nuclear exercise.
Plan of attack was just to descend into Barksdale Air Force Base, not let them know we're coming till minutes out.
The command post controller called out over the radio, "General Bedke, you need to come up here. I've got a call from Air Force One." That, of course, got my attention. The pilot said, "We will be arriving very shortly. I've got a list of things that I need from you. Let me know when you're ready to copy." I said, "Ready to copy," and I've actually still got that list. I remember the pilot saying, "I want 25 pounds of bananas," and I remember slowly turning, looking at my vice commander. My vice commander, I could actually see his head slowly turning, looking at me, and we both kind of got that look that went, "Okay." And back we were continuing on down the list, which was 100 muffins, 10 gallons of orange juice, and so on. I said, "How soon are you going to be here?" He said, "Shortly." So I said, "Can you define shortly?" And he said, "Very shortly." Then a general on Air Force One said, "You will tell nobody until we land."
But a local TV crew is already filming Air Force One's arrival.
Coming into land, we could pick up the local television station, and there's announced for the world to see, Air Force One is landing at Barksdale Air Force Base, so much for secrecy.
Touchdown.
There were armed soldiers on either side of the runway as we landed, with weapons at the ready.
It became clear that this was going to be a very impromptu visit. There's no big motorcade waiting, there were no crowds. And literally a small Dodge Caravan pulled up next to the plane.
We could see the president coming down the stairs. And we saw him get into the van, which up until that point we had always called Soccer Mom, because it looked like the kind of a van that soccer moms drive. After that day, by the way, we always called that van Air Force One.
We were driving really fast, and the president says, slow down. We don't have to go that fast.
President Bush said, son, there's no terrorist on this Air Force base. He later said he thought it was going to be the only time that he would actually die that day.
So we had the president zooming down the flight line at 85 miles an hour. We quickly got back to the headquarters building. At a certain point, he said, okay, I need to write a speech. The president sits down and just starts thinking and writing.
"90 minutes after the collapse of the second tower, Mayor Giuliani and his team have found a base at a firehouse about a mile from Ground Zero.
There was immediate concern about what's going to happen next. That was almost as immediate a concern as the rescue.
We just didn't know if another attack was going to take place. Was there a wave of people with guns that were going to come and start attacking us? Was there a wave of additional planes? We didn't know what the next drop was going to be. The rest of that day, no one took a breath.
In the immediate hours after the collapse of the towers, New York's leaders are focused on what they hope will be the rescue of thousands of casualties.
The devastation was overwhelming. And if there were people that were going to be rescued, you couldn't see them. And you knew it would be a while that you could get to them because everything was so heavy.
By midday, I knew saving people was going to be fairly limited. Sad to say, you know, I knew it was just a bad picture.
3 hours after the first plane hit the North Tower, Mayor Giuliani realizes he has to ask his medical advisor a difficult question.
We wanted to know how many body bags to get, which was a horrible thing to contemplate. And he said, "You're not going to need a lot of body bags." I said,